where I get to talk to the coolest people telling lawyers all the things they should be doing or that they're doing wrong. All kinds of fun stuff that we get to do. Today, I am so lucky to have Dave Oates here. And Dave is the one you call when shit hits the fan. He is a crisis marketing and PR expert, 30 years of experience in the field, and he's got a fantastic background that we're going to go through. And so, Dave, thank you so much for being here.
Are you kidding? Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, so real quick before we jump into all my questions, because I have a quite the list of shit hits the fan
Yeah,
questions.
bring it. Bring it.
Give us some of your background. Like I know you've been in military, you've been in sports. What
Y-
give us all the
Yeah.
details.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I started in PR as a United States Navy officer. So I was driving ships halfway through, became a Navy public affairs officer. That's how I cut my teeth, both not just on the crisis side, which, is where my business is now, but on the promotional side. And then after several different really challenging and exciting deployments that I had, including a stint on an aircraft carrier for the last 2 years of my career. I went into the tech sector. I worked for some agencies, worked in software, semiconductor, wireless, got my MBA, was a marketing head of a small 100-person, $20 million software company before hanging up my own shingle, which kind of scary now, is almost 19 years. And it was promotional at a time where it was PR people were predominantly media hounds. So we were going to, journalists and reporters and pitching different stories that had greater connotation than our clients. Social media started to really take over that, and the influencer marketing
Mhm.
discipline started to take over that. And so it eroded a lot of the initial business. But what transpired from that was now that every organization of every size became a target for somebody to take a pot shot at them and, pick your favorite platform, right? Whether it's Yelp, Google, Facebook, Instagram, all plethora of other social media accounts, Glassdoor, and the like. And I was starting to get requests from other PR practitioners to help them with their clients. And what was surprising to me is that they hadn't had the same experience that I did as a Navy
Mhm.
officer in dealing with crisis. I mean, early on in my carrier days alone, and I don't say this with any great boasting, it was just the opportunities that I had. We had a F-14 Tomcat crash in the middle of the Pacific. Luckily, the pilot and the backseater had ejected and came back safely. We had a couple of adverse incidents in Dubai and Australia, and that's not even including just being forward presence at a time where some people didn't like the United States Navy being in their backyard. And so I learned that really early on. And when I realized that now more and more organizations, regardless of their size or their industry or their scale, were now getting their reputation called into question because somebody had an axe to grind and a posting went viral. It was no longer just the news organizations that had to catch your ear and your eye.
Mhm.
It could be anybody. Or more and more businesses and nonprofits and government agencies needed to be really prepared for and dealing with those matters. And I was getting those calls. So I decided, let me focus exclusively on that and help other people do that. And I found my lane. And that was about 8 years ago. And honest to God, I wish I'd done it 10 years ago. And so you mentioned, in addition to military, I worked with big major league sports teams. I've worked in the healthcare market, particularly during COVID. I've worked in a nonprofit segment. You name the crisis too. I've seen a flavor from it, from the funny and ridiculous and somewhat annoying to big scheme of things like COVID outbreaks in nursing homes and mass shootings and those kind of things.
I think a lot of lawyers getting into kind of the lawyers and PR things, we think of
Mhm.
this or even public relations as being something that it has to be this mass catastrophe. But when it's a review about you online, it's not a mass catastrophe, but it's something that you have to get in front of and deal with.
It
Um,
impacts your ability to make money, to be profitable, to secure good talent, to keep good talent. And most organizations don't understand that it's no longer the press, to your point. It's no longer a story that appears in, pick your favorite, the Chronicle, the Oakland Tribune, the LA Times, whatever. It's now somebody who is taking aim at you on LinkedIn, and you may not even know it existed for several weeks until customers start calling you. You're hearing employee chatter, maybe on a WhatsApp channel or Slack, and things are starting to get out of hand before you even know it. And your ability to preserve market share and your
Mhm.
ability to be able to retain good people and to secure good clients and business partners becomes very much in jeopardy. And usually it's the silent reputation damage that you're not even prepared for.
Yeah. How do you think lawyers are uniquely bad at public relations?
Uniquely,
Well,
boy,
professional
so
services in
so let's
general. Yeah.
let me I appreciate the question, right? So let me take it a different way, right? I think lawyers are extremely good at risk management. I think
Hmm.
that's their job. Their job is to look at everything 6 ways to Sunday and figure out where do I preserve the or minimize the biggest litigation risk. And so they say nothing, or what they
Hmm.
say is very legalese, and it's one directional. There's no desire at all to get any feedback or to engage in conversation. Because the more engaged in conversation, the more things are in the public domain that are
Yep.
perfect, ripe for depositions and litigation and evidence and so forth. And I get all that. The challenge is you can preserve and mitigate the litigation of an individual and organization to the point that they go out of business. And there has to be a balance there, right? So it's really a question of economics and a
Hmm.
question of money. If your cost, if the benefit that you have in preserving litigation exceeds your ability to stay a going concern, either as a nonprofit through donors or a business to be able to secure your market share, you're gonna have to weigh the risks. And by the way, I should say about half of the referrals that I get come from attorneys who recognize that there's a need to do that. And so I have this we have this debate all the time. And I think it's a healthy debate for that one there. So lawyers, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily bad at PR. It's just not something that they are supposed to look at. And I
Right.
appreciate the ones who bring me in. So
Well, and I think public relations probably or PR in the legal space has gotten such a probably a bad rap to some extent because when you
yeah,
talk to the reporter for something, you never know exactly how they're going to spin it or what the article, like you thought you were giving a quote on something, and then the article's published and it's something totally different. So I think that's that risk, very conservative risk management style. So,
and I get it, right? It's the desire to have, because words matter in
yep.
communications, particularly in communications that again are ripe for depositions or
Mm-hmm.
filed in a court proceedings for litigation. You
Mm-hmm.
want every word of every sentence of every paragraph
Yep.
included in a quote. News organizations can't afford most people that luxury. They have to synopsize. They don't have the luxury by how their readers and viewers consume news to do that. So they have to condense. And also everybody has a filter, everybody has a bias, and
Right.
you are now dealing in many cases with news organizations with, I'll just call, non-experienced journalists. They're not paying because news organizations have lost a lot of revenue, ad partners and so forth like that. They can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to pay for the quality journalists who've been in the business for 20 years, who have covered a particular beat and know it inside and out. So you're dealing a lot of times with inexperienced reporters who may listen to what a lawyer says, but quite frankly don't understand it. And so then they'll synopsize what they think is important. The lawyer's like, whoa, that's way out of context with what I wanted to. But so it's incumbent upon me when I get brought into a situation where I'm working with lawyers to help recognize that beforehand and to be able to synthesize maybe a longer statement into something short that's digestible that still conveys the same general thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
if not specific, so that the narrative is being said. And look, I am also very sensitive to the notion that the more you say in the public domain, again, the more risk is involved from litigation. I want to make sure that at least the narrative is conveyed slightly to give that organization the space to continue operations as normal as possible while the lawyer gets to do their job, right? So at the end of the day, my job is to make sure that we create an environment where business can be conducted as normal as possible during an adverse event. And ultimately that's why I'm being brought in. So I take that mindset when I go and I create a communications plan for, a client, and that's particularly one where a lawyer's involved.
So, from a lawyer perspective, like say it's not a litigation thing, say it's a bad review, or how about proactive PR? Are there ways to be a little bit more proactive with things so there's good content out there already if something bad
Ooh,
happens?
Absolutely. And in some cases, when you're in the middle of litigation, you should put out more proactive PR, if for nothing else than to give that entity the ability to continue operations as normal, to continue bringing in the necessary revenue, or again, if you nonprofit donations or whatever the case may be, to then fund the litigation as well, and keep all the rest of the business going as well as can be expected for that. When you shut the conversation down, whether
Hmm.
it's through a news organization or just with customers and employees and partners who say we can't say anything, anxiety takes over, anger then succeeds, and people will walk with their credit cards, or at least with their feet if they're if they're employees, and usually in acrimonious terms. So that means they, like, whatever the litigation is, they are piling onto it because they're also a broadcaster with these, wonderful little devices that we all carry around in our pockets.
Right.
They have the same ability to state their opinion in a very public forum to their friends and families that even on the worst day still probably has as much, if not greater impact than, let's say, a news article or something that appears on, local TV stations or things like that, for sure.
Yeah. You said a couple things. You said legalese a few times in narrative. And that's one thing I struggle with lawyers when they're trying to message
Yeah.
anything, not just PR, is getting away from the legalese.
Yep.
Any tips for that and how that
Yeah. Yeah. This is about authenticity, right? This is about making sure that uh, companies look and feel and act to their audiences the same as they did before, which is with an authentic voice that's theirs, that's consistent. When you respond in an adverse situation with a lawyer being a spokesperson, which sometimes is necessary, you don't necessarily want the business owner and executive every time to be the spokesperson for the obvious reasons from a legal standpoint. The lawyer then comes in and speaks again as a lawyer should, but in a public domain, it gives the appearance that you're just putting up a wall, that
right.
you are absolutely not caring about your teammates, about your clients, about the general public. It's less of a concern for you. And so you're retrenching. And so those audiences who are making or breaking whether or not you make a profit at the end of a quarter or a month or a year are going to feel disenfranchised, and it'll only exacerbate the animosity, if not the anger that is already out there, and you're just going to dig yourself a deeper hole. So I say, I don't care what the crisis is, I don't care what the industry is, I don't care if you're profitable or not in profit. I don't care what it is. You have to respond to every crisis matter with two things: empathy and action, and wrapped in authenticity. Legalese, especially one that hasn't been used by an organization beforehand,
Hmm.
it doesn't have any of that. And while that's great in a courtroom setting, it is not so good necessarily in a public domain setting.
And I find a lot of people just don't understand what's being said. And so that just makes them madder, I guess, or more upset because they don't understand what's being said.
Yeah, yeah. It's just it at best it's confusing. At worst case, it looks disingenuous, and no one particularly likes that. When people get angry, particularly, again, employees, customers, business partners, people get angry when they cannot process another emotion, and that is usually in the case of that one. And I'm not a psychologist, but I'll play one on a live streaming event for the sake of this one, right? They feel that way when they feel sad, or they feel anxiety, they feel anger, they feel disenfranchised, they feel alone. And organizations that create that, particularly in a moment of crisis, because they feel they have to from a litigation standpoint, just add to that. And so that I'm getting a lot of organizations, particularly of late, who will call me in a matter of a public crisis. Again, on pick your favorite social media platform, something starting to gain steam, They thought they had a handle on it, or they're
Mhm.
working the legal channel, and they've answered it. And I call it the DIY it, or the lawyer has helped them do that. And it's only made matters worse. It just seems to be fanning the flames of anger and distrust. And so then I get a call in, and then it just, quite frankly, just takes that much longer to rectify it, because now you have not only the crisis itself, but you got initial response that was viewed as disingenuous or not authentic enough, without empathy, without action. And then, move on. We move on from there. So it just takes longer to get that back in those cases.
Yeah, that makes sense. I often hear from people in especially solo and small law firms that they're worried about their reviews on some of these social media sites, and they're
Sure.
worried about what people say out there. Any Where do they start with that if they won't even ask for reviews because they're scared someone's going to blast them or something like that?
Or I also get ones that say, hey, I don't really worry about them because that's not where I get my business, right? I get my business through other solo practitioners or small firms
Mhm.
because I'm an estate planning attorney and I know an estate litigator, right? I don't do the litigation, they don't do the planning. So we've got this great symbiotic relationship. Wow, awesome, awesome. The problem is, and this goes back to an early question about being proactive in PR. The problem is that when that referral is made, that client will likely go and Google you,
Mhm.
and search for you, just to get a little bit more background on that, particularly if in this case is the stakes are high. And it doesn't have to be, again, a crisis matter. It could be just, I've got a lot of assets. I'd like you to create this estate planning. I've got a lot here to preserve. And they Google you, and all they see is this other garbage that
Yep.
may or may not even be true, but it's the only thing out there because you haven't focused on preserving your brand through proactive means on an internet platform. It will at best slow down the sales cycle. Like, it'll just confuse the person who was referred to you, because they're like, this is totally different from what my trusted agent said. I may call back that trusted agent like, what's going on here? Or worst cases, that person just doesn't entertain uh, an initial call, an initial consultation. Maybe they're getting two or three other referrals from other people who don't have that same dilemma. You don't even get a chance. You just left money on the table you didn't even aware about. So I tell, particularly, really, any size law firm and any professional service, even if you don't get a dollar one through any sort of online advertisement campaign, social media, or whatever, it's important for you to be present on there, to show your expertise, and to have positive, sustained marketing PR content on there, because you don't want somebody who has an axe to grind for you to be the only narrative that's said on that line. Because I promise you, you're losing money if that's the case.
Yeah, and that goes back to the marketing stuff that I've talked about in the
Yeah,
live stream, where yeah, you can have 100% referral business, but they're still going online and checking you out before they call you. I do. As soon as someone says, "Oh, you should talk to so and so," I'm like, "Great." I go Google them and look up their website and check their LinkedIn, and if there's nothing there, I'm like, "What's this person doing?" Kind of
right.
thing. So,
Right. Yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that one there. And furthermore, I'll take it one step further. Don't be the last to know somebody's talking about you online too.
yeah.
There's free ways to do that. The one I always recommend to anybody, right? Again, but certainly lawyers, is alerts.google.com. Alerts.google.com. Put your name in parentheses, put your name in quotes, put your firm name in quotes. And anybody who's talking about you, you can set up within a couple hours of that posting, you'll get an alert to say somebody's talking about you, good or bad, right? But just be aware, be situationally aware, because your reputation is being won or lost online. And again, whether or not you want to participate, it will happen. So you might as well recognize that that is a place where you must preserve your reputation. As hard-earned as you've had it for offline efforts, you need to do that online as well.
Definitely, Google alerts are fantastic. I
Yeah,
Except for the name Jen Lee, I get a lot of. So the director of Frozen is named Jen Lee, and there's a special, like a sled hockey player named Jen Lee too. But it's really funny that you say that, because last year I was on vacation or something, and I got a Google alert for my name, and I was like, "Oh, who's it really about?" And I look, and it was me being quoted in an article that I had done like months ago, but hadn't
yeah, yeah.
remembered that I had done it. And so
Yep.
it works. Like it, you just have to wait.
There's a UK photographer who does a lot of sports
Yeah.
photography. So soccer, his name is Dave Oates, And so in my quotes, I put Dave Oates, and then I put Dave Oates Crisis Communications, and Dave Oates
Yeah.
PR Security Service, which is the name, and I get the relevant ones, right? So you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you can segment that down a little bit.
And it's also just as a side thing for Google alerts, like your practice area and things like that. Every night I get things on bankruptcy and things that I want to
Yeah,
follow because it gives good tools for writing and sharing on social media too without having to go
absolutely,
search for things. So
totally.
that's just
Yeah, yeah.
Google alerts, Google yourself. So how do you, so if we're looking at future proofing, because that's being proactive, I think is a great way to look at things. How do you build that reputation to weather a bad headline or a bad client review or something like that?
It's and this is especially true in the law community. Lawyers have a incredible amount of expertise and experience, and knowledge base that they should be ready and able to provide some very quick advice through. And they're quick articles you can write on LinkedIn, or in my case, I do about once a week. I do a 1 minute video reel.
Mm.
Usually I scrape, headlines of the day, something has happened, or an experience that I have, and I leave the names out of it to protect my clients' work. And I'll say these are the kind of things that this company's dealing with, or we saw this in the headline. Here are some lessons to be learned for all of you, right? Whether you're a big company or small company, these are things to take away from that. And oh, by the way, I should say when a company does something really good, I want to acknowledge that as well and say these are the things you should emulate, or these are the things you should avoid. And I usually will, like I said, take it from either clients I'm currently working on, names omitted, or headlines of the day, because I think they're relatable, at least at some level, to most of the audiences. And the audience for mine are professionals, right? Lawyers, CEOs, HR consultants, insurance, corporate insurance folks and the like, people who have the ear of somebody in a C-suite of their client base, whether if it's not the CEO and owner, to sort of pass that along for that. So I think lawyers should do the same thing and do that publicly. Those are the things that particularly if you've got, as you said, a complete LinkedIn social media account, and you got a blog on your site, leverage those internet properties to get a little bit more eyeballs on that. And the idea behind it is that when somebody Googles your name, that's what they see. So if somebody decides to take a pot shot at you, it's not the only thing out there. Um, Sidebar, you probably aren't going to be able to get that negative story or review, um, really removed, or in any sort of, you know, um, silenced or cease and desist or things like that. It's likely just not feasible. So the key is to create other content that's quite frankly more popular, that people can see and at least recognize who you really are, and put the negative Nancy's in the, in some sort of context.
And you could often, I had this personally experience where the negative review that happened to be out there, it was like the best negative review I'd ever had. Like, I didn't even have to
Mhm.
respond to it because it was the way it was written was like, that's exactly what I want people to think about me. Because so I think there's also ways to spin things and look at them. So
I, you know, I appreciate you saying that, because, and I say in particular for negative reviews, you should respond to both
right.
positive and negative reviews, right? And
Yeah.
the reason I say that, positive reviews are great, right? Say, hey,
Mhm. Yeah.
thanks so much, we're glad we could help out there. Negative reviews, you should say, hey, we appreciate your feedback, we appreciate, you taking the time to do so. And if it's something that you own that you didn't do right, then own it and say, hey, let us, as we said before, and probably you've done this before, and as we said beforehand, we'd love to talk to you about that and see how we can make this right. And you do it in a way that doesn't violate attorney-client privilege, that doesn't do privacy and things like that, but own it. And to your point, you can also have a situation where if somebody says, hey, this lawyer wouldn't help me because they thought that my case wasn't worth it, or they thought that my case wasn't there, or I wasn't, and that kind of thing. Man, those are great. You say, hey, we appreciate that, without divulging your point of view. We only take on clients that we think we can help. that we
Right.
think is actually of value.
Yeah.
And we're going to stay by that because our integrity matters to us. What a great way to validate that somebody's ticked off because you gave them an honest piece of advice that they didn't want to hear. It wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the right answer. And if you stick by that, I think, in a very, again, empathetic,
Right.
action-oriented, authentic
Mhm.
way, I think that's there. One more point. I
Yeah.
get a lot of clients who say, what do I do if I believe a review is bogus? In other words, it's made by somebody who wasn't a client. I say that's easy. You still respond to that one by saying something like, hey, appreciate you taking the time and effort to put a review in there. By the way, we don't have a record of you being a client. Would you call this number so if you want to talk through that, then we can obviously triangulate who you are and put that together. And again, you're not trying to necessarily change these reviews. You're not trying to change the negative reviews and positive, but you're telegraphing to everybody else who's going to be on that platform. You probably don't want to take this one at face value. This one might be bogus, and people get that, right? I will say I am as skeptical of as
Five
particularly
star.
for professional services, a review site that has nothing but 5-star
Yeah.
ratings, as much as I'm skeptical about ones that have really poor ratings. Because if you have all 5-star ratings, I mean, we are human beings, and we are wildly imperfect, and we don't get it right a lot of the
Every time.
times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so that's if you have beautiful 5-star reviews, my thought is that you're just padding that. So
Yeah. And I think consumers are like that too, where they look like if someone has all five, they're like, what's going on here? Why do they have all 5 stars? Because I've even had people who give 4 stars who like service was awesome, but their max in their mind that they can give anybody is 4 stars. And so like you would always have those. So
yeah, totally.
do you have anything you can share as like your what the fuck crisis moment when someone called you on the phone and like what kind of crazy situation has happened? This is totally on the spot, but do you have anything that you can share? It was just like, this is the craziest PR
The
crisis.
craziest.
Yeah.
Ooh, boy, I appreciate the question. I don't know if so. The things that I don't know if things necessarily surprise me as much
Right. That's what I was going to say,
anymore.
that nothing
They're
really surprises
intense.
you.
Like I may go, oh shit, like this is legit, but I can't say like, huh, that is really whacked. I've had one recently, and I won't name the name of the organization in this context, but Google me and you'll find a quote from me. There was a executive director of a nonprofit that was caught on one of those online predatorial
Mm-hmm.
sting operations where the person said, who was the stinger, I guess, said he was purported to be a minor soliciting to meet up with this person and caught him on tape. And
Wow.
and when I get those calls, it's sad to say it's people. Well, I don't know if sad to say or not. It shocks everybody around them, as it
Mhm.
should,
Right.
but it catches everybody off off guard that there's a time in which a lot of the management around that, the governing bodies around that, whether it's a board of directors or the freeze, and they
Mhm.
go, well, is this thing going to go away? Like, can we just have this person quietly go away and not say anything? And I say, man, that video's got tens of thousands of views already. I mean, those kind of things just spark like wildfire.
Yeah.
Usually followed by two or three other videos that are done the same day. Like these entities, because they make money on that, they're just churning out this type of content every day, all day, multiple times a day. Um, but it was getting tens of reviews. And what I see is and the surprising thing is that how quickly people try to freeze because they just don't want to believe what they're seeing. They just don't want to deal with it. And that's probably the one I go, what are you can't. And it's exacerbated, particularly in the nonprofits. I just did a 1-minute reel on that. When a lot of people who join those boards are personal friends
Hmm.
of the founder and executive director who put their heart and soul into this
Yeah.
organization. And I'm not trying to pass judgment on them, but in other words, the circumstances around that, I, I I I try to get out of the judgment business as much as I can and just deal with the reality. But the
Right.
board members freezing up is sometimes they just, WTF moments. Like
Yeah.
you can't do that. Remember, when you signed on to be a board member of any organization, but certainly a nonprofit, you carry a fiduciary responsibility, not to that person who's your friend, but to the organization and their legal entity. And please take that more seriously, because truthfully, your friendship ended the moment you took on that board member role.
Yeah.
And whether you're just an at-large director or you have an officer's position on the board, chairman, secretary, whatever. And I see that a lot. That's probably the first thing that comes to mind, but it's also very recent. I've been working on this case now for a little bit.
Well,
So
but I think that it's a not common, but it's one that I would expect to. And I've seen that with nonprofits and even for profit, if we want to talk about Coldplay concerts or something like that, where the CEO is caught doing something, and like how the organization responds is different than how the individual
the
responds.
individual still hasn't responded. That's the damning thing
Well,
about that. And I put that in there. Again, look, I hate those type of cases because it involves somebody's personal, particularly
yeah,
personal habits of two consenting adults, right? And take away the preceding example I gave of a minor,
yeah,
or involve the supposedly person playing a minor. But two
mm-hmm,
consenting adults, it's none of my business, and I just prefer to keep it that way. But
yeah,
sorry, it's CEO with an HR director. So the HR director is supposed to enforce what I assume they have is a no fraternization policy. But even if they don't, this person's a direct report to the CEO. Even if they weren't married, that's still something that you don't want to have happen.
yes,
And at that point, the CEO's job as being a leader should have the next day said, against the advice of counsel, I want to apologize to my teammates. I want to
yep,
apologize to the investors. I want to apologize to I want to apologize to our tech community. I want to apologize to my family. I'm going to step aside, and I'm going to work on that and not be the distraction for the company to continue doing the good works. Because I assume he's got an equity stake. So not only is he a leader, but he's also got an ownership stake, and he's on the board. I would theorize. I don't know what their board makeup was, but all of that should have been done and allowing the company to then continue operations, right? But that didn't happen. He didn't say anything. The board was forced to put him first off on a leave, and then he I think he did ultimately resign. But then the board had to spend a lot of money, and with Gwyneth Paltrow, which was brilliant, by the way, because the ex-wife Coldplay lead,
yes,
frontman.
yeah,
But having to put that out there just to continue operations, all of that could have been avoided. The time and expense had the CEO stepped up and done the right thing from a communication standpoint. And
yeah.
to my knowledge, he still hasn't, which is quite frankly beyond sad.
Yeah, and that's I think I've seen that with a couple of other organizations recently of where they could have gotten out in front of things and it would have been a much better result than waiting for a lot of people to find out. Like when they
Yeah,
first found out, they should have gotten out in front of it and they
yeah.
didn't. So,
And I get it, right? The person's dealing with their own shame, and I can't imagine what the family's going through. So again, I'm trying not to ask judgment, but at that point, somebody needs to advise them that they're supposed to do that. And this is probably getting back to the whole lawyer dynamic, right?
yep.
It's the lawyers are saying don't say anything. And I
Mhm.
recognize why they say don't say anything, because you're just adding more to the litigation matter for this guy and
Right.
possibly the company. But think about the expense and the time that company undertook for a couple of weeks, and it's still reverberating. That could
Yeah.
have been spent on the business with their conference and moving forward with for a company that's had tens of millions of investment capital poured into it. So there's a lot at stake there that I think could have been more preserved better by entertaining a little bit of litigation risk
Right.
for the point of doing the right thing from a reputation standpoint.
Angry. We've gone way over what I usually intend to go over. That's normal.
Because I
I
was
have a
yapping.
couple more
Sorry.
things. Yeah, no, it's good. It's all very interesting, and I'm going to talk about our another upcoming live stream we're doing. But real quick, how can people find you and reach you if they want to
I,
talk to
you can certainly go to my website, publicrelationssecurity.com. But if you, again, we're going to do the same. If you Google Dave Oates, Crisis PR. I'll pop up my LinkedIn profile, all the ways in which to contact me. And I do offer on my site free 15-minute consultation for anybody, targeting predominantly owners, executives, fellow PR people, lawyers, particularly, and all that. If they got a matter going on there, 15-minute confidential, happy to happy just to be a sounding board for that, and no expectations of moving forward. So please feel free to use that. Jen, this has been great. Thanks for the time and the conversation. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll put the your information in chat in the description as well. Now, what is your favorite Rebel anthem? Do you remember? We have a Spotify list. What's your
Oh,
anthem to?
man. So you want me to add the Rebel to this to your
Yeah,
Spotify,
whatever.
right? I do
Just
remember
add to
that
my
one there.
Spotify list of Rebel anthems. What do you?
Oh man. It's I I I don't know if it's necessarily germane for that, but I play in a jam band called
Mm-hmm.
Old Soul Revival with,
Okay.
as we're in both improvisers, with fellow improviser group leaders Mike Elvis and Josh Abel, and then a couple of the
Okay.
guys, Jonathan Seppi, who's not improvisers. We get in there, and one of my favorite songs that I like to do, which is sort of an anthem to equality and fairness to all, is a song called Wildfire. It's a folk roots song that's done there. That is fantastic. That's the one that probably comes to mind there. I'll send it to you so you can put it into Spotify, and that's probably my favorite.
I look forward to that. If you haven't heard enough of Dave, which I haven't, upcoming on September 16th, I'm going to host Dave and fascinating bankruptcy attorney Theta Page talking about rewriting your story when bankruptcy, business failure, or other setback happens. How do you rewrite the story and control the narrative? So I will put the link for that in the description to register for that live stream on September 16th. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time. Great
So
discussion.
appreciate you.
Yeah, and I'll talk to everybody soon. I'll see everybody next week on Friday morning.